it's not fun being a director of a bankrupt company with no sales. It's even less fun. Oh, I also became the non-paid chief financial officer. Whenever I'm the chief financial officer, you know the company's in transition, all right? And so this was the first transition that we went through. And so what happened was that they decided that what we would do is, since the patent and there was some equipment and other assets that had value, that they would form a new company and we would transfer the assets of ICU Medical to the new company. And then investors could invest in this new company. The new company would get loans, they would pay off the debts, and it sounded like it might work. Now the original shareholders were going to take a haircut. They weren't going to own as much as the company, and therefore, their value, their share of the proceeds would be reduced. But nevertheless, they weren't going to be wiped out. And so, Dr. Lopez, during the course of some of these negotiations, since he was one of the ones that would be reduced in value, he resigned from the board, and I'm on the board. I didn't, so there I am. And it was a midnight meeting, at least I left shortly before midnight. It started at 8 o'clock. And what they were proposing to do was to only let accredited investors participate in the new company. Now, accredited investors are people with a lot of money that know what they're doing. They're sophisticated investors, and they're supposed to know when they're putting money in the Madoff something or other, all right? They got sophisticated smarts on investing, and there's other people who really are not as wealthy, and they're called non-accredited, and they had to sign certain forms when they initially invested. Well, the new deal was, and the directors were going to approve it on the advice of the attorney that the company had, that it was okay, and that they were just going to allow the accredited investors participate, and the non-accredited investors would get wiped out. Little guys get wiped out, rich guys can participate. Well, I resigned at that point, okay? Now, fortunately, Dr. Lopez had kept control. He was able to come back on the board, or come back and get control of a new board of directors. But in the meantime, the creditors filed a lawsuit involuntarily to force ICU into bankruptcy. But ICU turned around and sued them for racketeering. And like most litigation, 90% or more, it was all settled. ICU paid off 110 cents on the dollar. And I was even on the creditors committee because I had a claim against ICU Medical. So it's kind of like I played all positions here in the course of this. And the good news is that ICU did go public. And here's Dr. Lopez today. Now fast forward a little bit. When the company started, there were certain things as it grew from. We cut it down from 50 employees down to 12 people. We had to change, our location and move from the high-price rental facility down to sharing a facility with another manufacturing company. But what he did is he infused a certain. He created a culture within the company. It's an egalitarian culture. It's a participatory culture. Anyone can stop the line. It's the ideas I think that Professor Deming initiated 30, 40 years ago, and the Japanese at Toyota picked it up. In fact, we hired someone from Toyota to help us implement that down in our facility in Mexico. There's over 2,000 employees now with ICU Medical. And the thing about inventors is they keep on inventing. Now this is the clave, and that was the device that replaced the clip-lock. In fact, part of the transition of going from 12 people to 50 and then 2,000 is it's not all the people are going to come with you, not all the crew members. One of them, he was really a good guy too, but he couldn't see the clay replacing the clip lock, and he just resisted that, and we had to let him go. Another one was the chief financial officer. Whoops, we had to let him go, and I became the chief financial officer again, but we found someone that really knew what they were doing, and now we have a great chief financial officer. And what this article is about is, unfortunately, Dr. Lopez's wife passed away about a year or so ago. She died of cancer, and he was attentive through her whole ordeal. And one of the things she observed was that the oncology drugs that are used are poisonous, and they get, little particles get, vaporized, and when they're transferring drugs between the patients and the various dispensing. And so she encouraged him to make an invention which would really protect the healthcare workers. And that's what this article is about, is that he came up with still another invention. Probably he's invented the company, but he also keeps making these products. You just don't find too many people that are both an inventor and an entrepreneur. Now, you talked about Fred Smith of Federal Express. The story I heard about him was that he was a pilot in Vietnam, fighter pilot. Not only that, but he did a second tour. And when FedEx was real close, all right, I guess he stopped off in Vegas and shot craps and made payroll. They're pretty risky, some of these guys, all right? Dr. Lopez always told his children, don't use the word I can't. And so he got a phone call when all this was happening and the company was falling apart and it looked like, they were, going to be wiped out. And he was on the boat, and this youngest boy was with him, and he said, well, I can't do anything about it. I can't turn it around. And his son popped up and said, Dad, there's no such a word as I can't. And he knew, he said this, he knew he'd be a hypocrite if he didn't try. And he came back and he tried and turned it all around. So this is when it went public back in 91. It was $9.25 over the counter. This is an article just, I think, in June about how great we're doing. Our sales are over 200 million now.